Hey everyone, and welcome back to another tier list. So today, as you can see, I'll be ranking all of David Fincher's films. So this guy is one of my favorite directors, probably top 5 favorite directors of all time, to be honest. He's made some fantastic psychological thrillers and dramas and things like that. He tends to make very dark kind of films, but he has a very particular style that's kind of perfectionist and slick and sleek, and you can really see it whenever you watch pretty much any of his films. It's quite recognizable, but he makes super entertaining and dark films that are like, more often than not, like they're just, I don't know, super dark and gritty, but fun at the same time, and also filled with all this really cool style and everything. And obviously, with the release of his new film, The Killer, which just hit Netflix, I've been able to watch it, and I've been waiting for that to come out so that I can do this tier list. So now I've seen it, I'll add it to this, and we'll go through all 12 of his films. So just to be honest, like I don't hate any of his movies. I actually like all 12 of them. That's, I guess, why he's one of my favorite directors. But we'll see where they all land anyway. So first up here we have Alien 3. So this movie was his first film. A lot of people hate this. Most people actually have it as his worst film. I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise. Obviously the first 2 films are great. I really like the 2 prequel films that Ridley Scott made as well. I think the AVP movies are pretty average, and Alien Resurrection is one of my least favorite ones. But Alien 3, I revisited a few months ago for my Alien tier list, and the assembly cut, which is like the extended version, is actually a pretty good film, in my opinion. And even though David Fincher didn't get to kind of release the film he wanted to make, it was his first film, and I don't think it's awful at all. I know a lot of people hate it, and I guess compared to the first 2 Alien films, it definitely pales against those 2. But as a standalone kind of first film from a director, it's actually pretty good, and I'm going to put it in the good category because, yeah, I like it, and I think it deserves to be seen more and appreciated kind of just for what it is, rather than compared to the other films, which are like 2 of the greatest sci-fi movies ever, pretty much. So Alien 3, the assembly cut, is actually a pretty decent film, so I'm going to put that in the good tier. Next up, we have Fight Club. This is actually there's a few films that kind of switch between my favorite David Fincher movies, but Fight Club is always in those top 3. So of course I'm going to throw that straight up in the awesome tier. It's just a super original, fun film. It's quite dark, it's quite violent, and like a bit mental and a bit out there, but it's a really fun film. It really shows off all of David Fincher's kind of early style. This was at the end of his 90s part of his career. And it just looks really cool. It works really well. It's got great characters, memorable scenes, memorable dialogue. Yeah, it's just a really fun, good-looking movie. Brad Pitt and Edward Norton are great here as well. The musical score's got this kind of weird, I don't know, simplistic kind of synthy sound, which is cool as well. There's just so many fun, memorable scenes in this movie, and I just think it's like super. I don't think it's really underrated. I mean, it's really appreciated, I think, by most people who like his movies, but I do think it's one of his top 3. So next up, we have The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a more recent film. This is a very dark movie. Those psychological thrillers that he makes, this is probably, quite possibly, the darkest movie he's made. I'm going to put it in the great tier because it's not quite awesome, but it's definitely above Alien 3. It's got his style all over it. Daniel Craig's great here. Rooney Mara's really great here. The music by this duo of composers that he's worked with over the last 3 or 4 films is really good here too. And it's just a mystery that really kind of sucks you in, and you really get invested in these characters. It's a really dark, gritty film. There's a lot of nasty kind of stuff in it, but it's a very, very good psychological thriller. One of his better ones, I think, and definitely deserving of being in the great tier. Next up, we have another more recent one, even though it's still like 9 years old now. But that is Gone Girl from 2014, and that is another one that's going to be up in the great tier. It's an excellent film. I remember seeing this in the cinemas when it came out, and it's another one of those films like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo that just sucks you in with its story. It's got a really great twist in it, but it comes about halfway into the film instead of at the end. And if you haven't seen trailers for it or haven't heard about the movie, you're really not expecting what happens, and it's a really great film. Again, it's got his style all over it. You've got a great performance from Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. A great musical score here as well. It's just another super fun but very dark and gritty kind of film. And it's really kind of like David Fincher at the top of his game with these couple of movies here. Even though I wouldn't put it in the awesome tier because it's only just shy of that with the other films that that I'm going to have up there as well. Next up, we have Zodiac. So this is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I'm going to chuck that straight up in the awesome tier as well. I think that it's one of the best, probably top 3 serial killer films I've ever seen, and that's a really great genre of film that's, especially when it's true life, kind of based on real people who were or weren't found. Like the Zodiac Killer was never found, so it's quite interesting to watch the story on the detectives that kind of lost their mind, like through obsession over decades of trying to find out who this guy was, and still never really coming to a conclusion at the end of the film. And I've always found that more interesting than movies where they actually find out who the killer is at the end. So I think that really kind of worked out well for the movie. And it's got great performances, music, style, the visual aesthetic of the film that really takes you back to like I think it was the 60s and the 70s in, is it San Francisco, I think? I think it's there. But yeah, it's a really excellent film and like one of his best. And like I said, it's probably interchangeable with Fight Club. It could be his best film as well. But as I said, there are about 3 that I would put all pretty much in first place. So next up we have Panic Room. This one's kind of seen as a lesser film because it's not as big scale or anything. It doesn't have any huge twists or deep and meaningful moments or anything that's kind of like groundbreaking like a lot of his other films are. But for what it is, which is simply just like a break-in kind of thriller, it's actually very good. So I'm going to put it at the top of the good tier. It's better than Alien 3. And it's got his style all through it, but it is just a smaller scale, kind of straightforward thriller. It's probably his most straightforward kind of film. Great performances though. Jodie Foster's great here. Kirsten Stewart's actually good in a film. Jared Leto's over the top and crazy, and Forrest Whitaker's good here too. I really like the way the camera moves in this film throughout the house. It's one location. It's like this townhouse, so it's like 3 or 4 stories high. And just the way the camera kind of sweeps in and out of all the levels and all that is really cool. And the way he shot it, just like it was kind of ahead of its time with the technology that they used because the film's like 20 years old now. But yeah, it was really clever with how they did it with CGI and stuff. But it's a really cool movie. I think it's a bit underrated. And I really want them to hurry up and bring it out on Blu-ray somewhere because I'd love to get this movie on Blu-ray. It's pretty much one of the only films of his that I don't have. So that would be cool to get one day. Next up we have The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is kind of a departure for David Fincher. He's usually in the realm of thrillers or something a bit darker and grittier, but Benjamin Button is kind of like a Forrest Gump story where it's like someone's life who's got this kind of magical, over-the-top kind of life that he's lived, and it's told in kind of reverse because he ages in reverse, so he's like an old man that gets younger and younger throughout his life, which is quite interesting. And I think it's another underrated film. I'm going to put it in the great tier because I really like Benjamin Button. I think it's a really good movie, and it's another one I think is underrated in this director's catalogue. Brad Pitt's really good here. This is his 3rd collaboration with Fincher. The movie looks great. It has some fantastic sequences. And I'm not really sure why people seem to dislike this movie because it doesn't really do anything wrong. I know that, people who like Fincher like his dark thrillers and all that, but this movie is actually just still a really good film, and it still kind of feels like his film because it has his style all through it. And you can just tell, like, it's got his fingerprints all over it pretty much, and it's a great film. Great soundtrack and cast. Cate Blanchett's great here as well. And the setting of New Orleans is really cool. I really like films that are set there because it's a unique kind of setting. So yeah, I think it's a great film. It deserves to be there. Next up we have Seven, and this is the other film that I'm going to put in the awesome tier. And this is also another fantastic serial killer film, although this is not based on a true story. It is very cool. I watched this film again like a week ago, and it's such a dark film, but it's very, very cool. Great performances from Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman and Kevin Spacey, who's only in the film for a little while, but he is very memorable here. Has one of the great movie twists of all time at the very end with what's in the box and all that. But I just love this film. It's super dark. It's super gritty. It's in this like unnamed kind of city that you don't know where it is, but it feels like Gotham because it's just crime-ridden. and it's raining all the time, and it's just filthy, and it's chaos and everything. But it's a great film. It's his second movie, so he did really hit it out of the park in the beginning of his career. Even though Alien 3 kind of slipped, 7 was just an excellent film, and couldn't really praise it high enough. Like, those top 3 films, they're really like all perfect. Like, there's nothing I'd change about any of them. And they are my top 3 favorite of his movies, and 3 of my favorite films of all time, to be honest. So, so 7 definitely deserves to be up there in that top tier. Next, we have The Game. This is another underrated one. I know people do like it, but it's not talked about as much when you talk about Fincher films. It's definitely another great film, and I'm going to put it in the great tier above Benjamin Button. It's got a unique storyline. It's about a rich guy who doesn't really care too much for life, doesn't really appreciate anything or anyone, and gets a gift where it pretty much turns his life into a game, but it's like a living hell for him because he doesn't know what's real and what's part of the game. He thinks he's being conned and taken for a ride, and he thinks he's, being hunted and all this, and it just really goes to the extremes with that storyline. And I really like the film, and it kind of goes crazy at the end, but I like that they just kind of stuck with it and went with it. And if you haven't seen the film before, it's got a really great twist ending, and I think it works for the film. A lot of people think it lets it down, but I think it's great. I think Michael Douglas and Sean Penn are great here, and it's also one of my favourite musical scores for a David Fincher film. It's just got this mysterious kind of tone and sound that goes throughout the entire score, and it's just fantastic. It's another dark film as well, but it's not super violent or anything. But yeah, I would highly recommend The Game if you haven't seen it, because I think it's one of his better films and more underrated films. Oh, sorry. Next up, we have The Social Network. This is one that is probably going to be a hot opinion for me, because most people would put it in the awesome tier or the great tier. For me, I'm going to put it in the good tier. I'm going to put it at the top, though. It's a very good film, don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing the movie for putting it there. I know it's like most people's top 3. I think it's a very well-made film. Like, it's got his art and style all through it. It's perfectly made and put together. It's got a great cast, 2 great performances, and a great soundtrack. Great visuals, everything like that works, but I just think the story isn't super interesting. Like, obviously it's about the beginning and the formation of Facebook, which is pretty cool. Sorry. But the story just doesn't do as much for me as these films that are higher than it on the list. But yeah, it's still a good film. I still like it. I watched it again a couple months ago now, but I do like the film still quite a bit, obviously being in the good tier. So yeah, I'm going to keep it there. Next, we have Mank from 3 years ago now. This was a film that came out after Gone Girl, but he did it like 7 years later. And it was his first film in a long time, so I was looking forward to it. But unfortunately, it was a disappointment. I didn't hate the film, but I really wanted something more from it, and I just think it's okay. So I'm going to put Mank in the okay tier. For me personally, it is his weakest film. I have nothing wrong with films set in the 40s or 30s or black and white or anything like that. I watch a lot of old movies, but this film just wasn't very interesting because it's all into the politics of the film industry back in the day, and nobody now really knows much about that or cares much about that. And so a lot of it was just kind of dull and boring, to be honest, even though the film looked great and has a great cast and all that. It was good and enjoyable to watch, but I've never really felt like going back to it, so I'm just going to keep it in the okay tier for now. Definitely is his weakest film, though, unfortunately. But we did get a new film from Fincher just a few weeks ago in cinemas, but it came out the other day here in Australia on Netflix, and that is The Killer. So it was exciting seeing him return to that kind of thriller genre, and I was very excited to see this movie, and saw it like 2 nights ago. And so I'm going to put this one in the good tier next to Panic Room. So I think it's pretty much equal to Panic Room for me. I really like the movie. I think it's very good. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's one of his better films, though. It's definitely much more slimmer as far as story goes. There's very little in way of story or dialogue. It looks great performance, especially Michael Fassbender. He's great here. The soundtrack's good. There's some really fantastic settings. I like that it's set in New Orleans and Florida and the Dominican Republic, so it looks really cool in those locations. You've also got Paris and New York, so it's a bit all over the place, which is really cool, kind of like a globe-trotting thriller. but I was just kind of expecting a bit more from the movie. It's kind of a bit slim, but for what it is, it's good. I like it. I would recommend it. I was just expecting a little more from it, unfortunately. I still would really like to watch it again because it may go up a few more places after a second or third watch. So I would definitely recommend the movie because it was definitely a solid film. And yeah, very enjoyable as well. So that's my list, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your ranking down below. And as I said, like the films in the top 3 tiers, I really like all of them. So I'd recommend all of his films, honestly, besides Mank. So definitely why he's one of my favorite directors. So thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.